Hey everybody, it's Angela and I am back with another design team project for SaCrafters. And this is a little Halloween mini album, a little Frankenstein. And I also have these spider webs. This is a web, one of those I had already embossed for an old project and hadn't used. And then I had this full-size web that I'm going to use on this project. I look at a few other things I have. The tree was a little bit too big for this project, so I just took some of SaCrafters spiders to go with the web. And then I have two new products from this year's Halloween products that are out there. These kind of Day of the Dead type skulls that I got at Michael's, and these little alligator clip spiders. And those are the only two new Halloween things I got this year. Then I went back in my stash of my old Halloween stuff. I've got this kind of fun fiber, this ribbon, these left over from a different project, these really old resin pieces that I got in a scrapbook garage sale, some tags and that I got clearance at Michael's, that I got at a garage sale and haven't used yet. And I had some Halloween papers. These are from hot off the press, but they were a little grungy, a little darker than what I wanted. And since this Frankenstein is kind of like a younger aged Frankenstein, I wanted it to be a little more cutesy, a little more whimsical and kid friendly. So I had this that I got at Target on clearance a couple years ago, along with that little tag pad. And actually this was from 2010, I think was the date I was looking at there. And it has really fun, not so scary papers in it. And I like that it had that little Frankenstein on the back. So this is the paper I'm going to go ahead and use to cover my pages. And since that cover page, has the holes in it, the evacuated spaces, I decide not to cover that and I paint the front cover instead, but all the rest of the pages I cover with paper. And I need 8 pieces, so I grabbed, there's 6 in that K&Company paper collection, and I have to grab 2 out of my hot off the press papers. And so I think I go with the spider web and these candy corns because they kind of fit in a little better with the more whimsical paper that I'd already had. They didn't quite look as grungy as some of the others. If I was going for a grungy look, those would be perfect, but this is a little bit cleaner look. And so I start with this and I start tracing out for my first page, and I go to trace around the bolt, and then I think, that's going to be a lot of work to cut around that bolt, and I think I'd rather emboss it so it was metallic anyway. So I decide not to cover the bolts, and I cut this out, and then I think, this paper has some great cut apart items that I can use as embellishments throughout my whole album. So I'm not going to cover one of the pages with that. I'm going to actually just cut that paper apart and use it for embellishment. So I go on to my next sheet of paper. And so this is what I do for all of them. As I cut it out without the bolt, I just trace around it, then cut on the inside of my trace line. And I only show you here about one page of me doing this, just to give an idea for people who've never done this before how to, make it as easy as possible. So after I trace it out, make sure it fits okay. And before I can glue that down, I really need to emboss the bolts on this. So I'm going to grab my Versamark, which is just kind of a sticky glue pad. And that's what makes the embossing powder kind of stick to where you want it to be. So I'm just going to put the Versamark glue on the bolts, then put the gold embossing powder on there, and I use gold accents throughout the whole album. And then you just take a heat gun, a heat tool, and you heat it up, and you can see it kind of changes color there when it's done, so it's really simple to do. And then I put my paper on top of it. And at first I go almost to put my glue on right onto the paper, but really it's less messy if you put the glue onto the chipboard, because then you can let your glue stick go over the edge and it doesn't get onto your mat. Whereas if you put it the glue direct to the paper and go right up to the edge, you'll probably get glue all over your work surface. So just a little tip, put it on your chipboard first and then it'll keep your surface less messy. Now I'm just taking an emery board and kind of sanding the edge, you know, because I don't cut out perfectly straight or anything. So that helps you get it nice and straight to the chipboard, and it looks really good. And then I'm also searching in there for some black ink and an ink applicator, and I'm just going to ink all the edges black on this mini album. And that just defines the edge and gives it a finished look. You don't have to do this, it's just a personal preference. And then it also hides the edge of the chipboard, so there's no brown showing on the edges. It has a black edge for the whole album. So there we go. And then like I said, what I do is I go through the whole thing. Oh, there, I punched my hole to make sure I didn't forget where it was. I go through the whole thing and I do all the bolts next. So like I'll do the bolts on the back page, and then I'll go through all the other pages while I've got this embossing powder out, do all of the bolts in gold. And I actually do that spider web in gold. And then I make the hair on the front cover black and the spiders black. So while I have my embossing stuff out, you can see I just went embossing mad. I also did some gold embossing powder on the eyes on the front. So what I did was I just painted it green because, like I said, it would be hard to cover that with paper and cut out all those evacuated spaces. So I painted the front of his face green and the back of that page black. And so now I want to add a little more interest to that because it was kind of just a lot of green. So I decided to give him a few little tattoos there with a Recollections Halloween stamp. It's just a little spider web. And that first time I put the Versamark direct onto the stamp and then used my fingers to press the stamp down. And that doesn't give quite as crisp of an image. And see, I was going to do it again, but I decided I wanted a little bit crisper image, so I'm getting a block. And you'll see when I put that down, it'll make the whole thing a little more defined and everything. And then I'm using some purple embossing powder here. It doesn't look very purple because it's such a thin design. It comes out looking more black, but it does match in really well. So there you can see it's a little bit finer than the spider web I did up on his temple. But I'm going to have other stuff up there that will kind of cover that up a little bit, so I wasn't too concerned about it. And then of course I make a mess on my work surface, which, you know, is just typical of me. So I clean that up. And I'm liking that. It kind of cuts up that green space on his face there and just gives a little more interest. Makes him a little, you know, spookier looking, I guess. So I just clean up the Versamark glue off of my stamp there and the embossing powder off of my mat. And let's see here. So there's his hair, and I did that with some black embossing powder, and so now I'm going to stick that down now that I've got my stamping done. I just match the holes up, and that looks really cute. And the black embossing powder actually has a little bit of purple specks in it, so it really works good. And then, like I said, on that one paper, I went and cut out a lot of the designs out of it so I can use as embellishment. So this is one of them that I cut out of that paper. I'm going to put that on the front. Then I have some little candies there that I also fussy cut out of that paper. And since I'm going to put it over that scar that's kind of a hole, I go ahead and ink the back of that piece of candy black so that it doesn't look like stark white showing through that hole when you turn the page over. So I put that little piece of candy there, and then I put a little candy corn on there, and it just brings a little more color down to that side, and I wind up doing a little more on the front of this later. So that's all I'm going to do for the front for now. I think about putting a little ghost on there, but changed my mind. That's also fussy cut out of that piece of paper, and I liked it because it kind of introduced the album, you know, Trick or Treat, Happy Halloween, and kind of introduces the album. I'll probably wind up putting pictures of the grandkids in Halloween costumes, you know, throughout the years. It'll probably take a couple years to fill this album up for me, but I liked that it was, you know, kind of kid themed. So there's that spider web. I cut it in half and I embossed it gold, and I'm going to use the two of them as pockets on two different pages. So I'm just making sure that, you know, fits pretty good. And I just put a little hot glue just around the outside edge and glue that down. And then that way I can stick some photo mats tags in that as a pocket. And what I do is I grab that K&Company pad that I had, and even though it has the speech bubbly thing on there, I just go ahead and cut the speech bubble part off so that it's just a regular tag shape. And then that's what I'm going to use to fill all my pockets with. So now I was just looking as to where I was going to put the other spider web, and I like that spider web paper kind of carries the theme, so I go ahead and I put my other half of the spider web on that page. So those two pages are started, and then I decide to, start going back to some of my other pages and filling them out a little more. This black page was looking a little stark, so I put some orange stickles around the eyes, and I have a spider down there on the bottom right hand corner. And I put some of that fun fiber kind of behind that Happy Halloween, that kind of webby fiber. And I put some stickles on the spider, but it doesn't really stick because I've already embossed that spider. So he has kind of a glossy surface. So I do go back later and put some enamel dots on the spider's body instead of the stickles. I just wipe the stickles off. So now I'm going back to try to decorate a few more pages. I'm looking at the tags that I have, picking out some of the ones that I like the best. Trying to figure out, how I'm going to hold those onto a page. And so I look at some of my new product that I got this year, and one of them was these skulls. And I thought that the skulls would work good as like a little tuck spot to hold it in instead of a pocket. So I'm just putting it around the side and bottom and placing it on there. And then that way I can just kind of tuck a card behind it. And then to dress it up a little bit, I have these mulberry like paper flowers that I've had for ages. They just seem to go on and on. I bought a box of them at one point, and I've been using on these things for years, and I never seem to run out. But I like the fact that they're not very dimensional, so they're not going to bulk up my album too much. So I pick out a couple citrusy colors that match the paper, because the ghost has little green eyes, circles around his eyes, and the background paper has that kind of purpley color. So I just pick out those two colors to layer some flowers up. And then one of the ghosts that I fussy cut out of that paper as kind of my flower center. And then I go with this tag that brings out the green on that page. So that page is pretty much done right there. Now this page is where I'm going to use one of the gold skulls. I wanted to have the skulls run as a theme twice since I had two spider webs. I was going to do two tuck spots with skulls, because the pink skulls that were also in that package just didn't really go with this paper. There's no pink in there, so I just used the white and the gold skull. So now I'm looking to see what color of flowers I want to use on this one. So I'm looking for some more of the purple and orange. And then I decide to use one of these skulls I had left over from a previous Halloween as my flower center. So I just put those two colors on there, and a little hot glue behind one of these skulls. And then I like that word boo up there. So I go ahead, and that boo is also fussy cut out of the paper. And then I find this one that says October 31st on it. Has kind of those orange colors. So that page is pretty much done as well. Then I'm thinking about using one of these tags as a pocket. But that one, I didn't really want to cut the design, so I wasn't quite sure. So I decided to go back to this page, and I pull out those kind of, I had some pumpkins and bats left over, I think from a kit that I got one year, and I didn't use all of them that were in the kit. So I'm just placing a few bats around. Instead of a spider on this web, I decided to go with bats. And then I have some gold smooch ink that I'm just using to put some little eyes on the bat so they stand out a little more. And I put a little bit of the gold smooch ink on the stars inside that boo as well, just to bling it up a little bit. And the back, I'm not going to do anything. I used my busiest paper on kind of the back, the one that had the little Frankenstein on there, and I just kind of left that as a standalone. So I'm also going to put that little scary on the web as well. And then I go back to these pages, and I do still have that piece of fiber there that I wasn't quite sure if I could make a belly band or a tuck spot with that, but it just didn't seem sturdy enough. So I go back to my papers and I'm looking through and I'm thinking, I could make a little trifold or something with this border strip. So I'm looking at that, but it's not double-sided paper. So I decided to just double it up and make just I guess it would be a bifold instead of a trifold, just a flip that I could put a photo behind. So I'm going to double it over on itself so that then it's double-sided. Use my bone folder to get it all adhered down. I didn't get it exactly even, so now I'm just going to trim it up a little bit just to make sure there's no white showing, and take my black ink and go around it. And then I'm just going to fold this over, and I fold it so the boo kind of shows on the front. And I want to put that there, but it's kind of getting lost against all the candy corns. So before I stick it down, I decide that I want to put that fiber behind it. So if I'm going to put fiber behind it, I need a stronger adhesive. So I go ahead and I change to this, which is just a really strong double sticky tape. So I go ahead and pull that off. And then I go ahead and cut a length of that fiber to go behind. And that just gives another texture and dimension, and it just kind of helps raise that up from the background. It kind of puts a little definition between that background paper and the little book. So I go ahead and stick that on. And then if I'm going to put a picture inside, I thought I'd like it to have a little bit of a matte. So I go back and I find a piece of this kind of purpley paper that was the bottom part of the border strip. And I just cut it down to be a photo mat and ink the edges black. And I'm just going to put that on the inside. So there I can put a little photo of one of the grandkids in a Halloween costume. So there's that, but it wants to pop open, so I need to find something to use as a closure, something I can tuck that under to hold it down. So at first I think about these resin pieces. These are Karen Foster resin pieces. I looked at it from 2004, so pretty old ones that I got at a scrapbooking garage sale. But they were a little too wide, so I go back and I use another one of these little skull things, but I put hot glue just on one side of it, but I should have removed the sticky foam tape it already had because the cover wasn't slipping very well underneath, and you'll see later I'll fix that. I'll take that embellishment back off, remove the foam tape from that side so there's nothing hindering me poking the front of that cover underneath as a closure. So anyhow, I go back to these little pumpkins and bats that I had left over from a kit, and I just inked one of those pumpkins and put one of the bats on there just to give a little extra dimension. And see, it's not closing super great, but I think, oh, maybe it'll work, and then I have to go back later and fix it because it just bothered me. So here's a little more of that kind of fun fibery thing, and I had gotten that a couple years ago at the dollar store. I think it's just web decoration, you know, party decoration. But I just like all the loose fibers. I put down some hot glue, and then on this one, I take off part of the strip covering up the adhesive, and that's where I put my hot glue, but I leave the rest of the strip covering the adhesive on the right hand side just so there's no glue behind it to catch on the tag. Oh, I hope that makes sense. I'm not using my words very good today. Sorry, guys. So I have this little box from Oriental Trading that has Halloween stuff in it. And it had these little spiders that you're supposed to attach like with brads or eyelets in there. And I decided to just put an eyelet in one of the spiders and then use some thread to kind of tie him on, some gold thread, kind of look like he's hanging from that gold spider web. So I'm just going to do that, and then that way he can kind of dangle loose on that page and just give a little more dimension and texture. So I go ahead and first I think about tying it to the actual web, and then I change my mind and just go ahead and tie a knot in the thread, and then I'm going to put a little glue on that and tuck it right behind that Karen Foster resin piece, and that's what's going to hold it on there. So I make sure I have a nice tight knot, and then I put a little glue on there and put it right behind that resin piece, and that holds it down, and I make sure that the hot glue didn't like seep down through the spider web and glue my tag in there. So there I've got those pages done so far, and I'm kind of checking it where I'm at. So that page is done. This page here is done both sides, and there is where it just kept bothering me. So I peel that back off. I take my craft knife and I'm going to remove the foam pad from that side so that there's nothing hindering me sticking the front cover of that little booklet behind there. So now I go and re-glue it, and that's what I should have done at the beginning. So I re-glue that, and now it works perfect. So these two pages are completely done, so now I've just got these two sides of these pages left. And this page was a little, you know, the pattern was kind of big, and so it was a little blank, and so I have some Halloween stamps that, you know, I need to get them out and use them every year to get my use out of them. So I have this October 31st that I go ahead and stamp on there. And I'm thinking about putting this spider, another one of the SaCrafters spiders on there. And I'm not sure about it. And then I'm looking at my other two stamps, and I like this skull stamp. So I go ahead and put it right in the middle of this orange circle. So I'm liking that. I like the bold graphic of it, but I'm like, what am I going to use as a pocket? How am I going to hold? I don't want to put a photo mat now right over what I just stamped, so I really need to have a pocket there. So I'm thinking about using that fiber because it would be see-through, but if I glue the edges of that fiber, I'm just not quite sure, you know, that glue is going to show through. I think about using the spider as a tuck spot, but he's kind of small. So I go ahead and take this tag that has the same green in it, has the same kind of dots on it, so it kind of is a theme, and it's a pattern that's okay for me to cut up. You know, I won't really lose anything by cutting that pattern up, and it gives me a place to do some journaling. It has a few little journal lines on it. So I'm going to use that as my pocket. I go ahead and ink around the edge. And then that way you can still see the skull when you take the tag out of the pocket. You know, you can still see that detail there. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my spider on there. And then I think that's all I do for this page. I just find a couple of tags that I can go ahead and put in there. So I'm liking that. Looking at some of the other things in that box to see there was like some little spider webs and witches that you can attach with brads. I had some other old brads, that hat and boo, but I decided to go with that little heart clip that has the purple on it, and I just put that on the pocket just as another little bit of texture. Just another tiny small detail. So now I need to do that skull page, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do, and I think my camera cuts off. My camera battery dies here soon. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do on this one, and I decide instead of a pocket to do a waterfall page. And so I go back and I pull some of the papers that I've used throughout this whole album and use those to make a waterfall, and I will show you that here since my camera cuts out. So here is the finished album. As you can see, I put some fibers up there on the, or some ribbon up on the ring, and I clipped my little alligator clip spider on there. There's the fibers, got little skull and crossbones and just some orange ribbon. I put some enamel dots that I got from Marissa. Thank you, Marissa. Those are homemade Marissa dots. And I just put those for some extra color. And then there's the alligator clip spider. He could clip up here on the ribbon, you know, if you didn't want it on his face or anything, but I kind of just liked it right there as a little detail, kind of like a closure almost, although it isn't. And there you can see the Happy Halloween cutout with that kind of fun fiber behind it. And you can see there's the Marissa dots that I put on the spider, just because the stickles I had put on there weren't sticking very well because it was already embossed. And that fiber just really lends something. It gives a looseness to the whole thing. There you can see the little free hanging spider on there from his little gold thread on the gold SaCrafters spider web, and that old Karen Foster resin piece, and a couple little tags. Gives me plenty of space to journal on the back, or I could put the photos on the back and journal on the card. And then there is the little book with its closure, the photo mat on the inside, that fun kind of ribbon behind it, a little bat and pumpkin on there. And they're kind of corrugated, which is cool. And then there you can see I put some more Marissa dots on that spider. There's my tags that I chose for that one, and some of the stamping, and that you know, gives me a place to do a little bit of journaling on that green pocket card. And I've got that little purple heart clip on there. And then on this page is where I used the sparkly skull as a tuck spot, and it matches that ghost. The ghost has the same sparkle that the skull has on it, so they really look like they match. And then I just have a green tag that I found in my stash to go along with that little journal spot. And then there's the waterfall, and I put the 3 Karen Foster enamel dots that say treats. It has a pumpkin face and a creepy. And I did some stamping on the back since those are just one-sided, single-sided papers. So I can put more photos on the back. I can use some little label stickers if I want to do some more extra journaling. And then this is the side I put some purple enamel dots on the scary. Got the 3 little kind of corrugated bats and the SaCrafters gold embossed spider web. And just a tag in there. And then lastly I have the gold skull, some flowers, and that little skull embellishment, another tag and stuff there. And like I said, I didn't do anything on the back. I just liked this paper as a standalone. It has the little Frankenstein guy on there and the other little monsters. And that is my finished little mini album. It turned out so cute. It'll look great with a bunch of kids dressed up in their Halloween costumes, you know, photos in there. So I really love how it turned out. So that is my completed project. If you have any questions or anything, just leave me a comment below. And if you use the code AngelaFans when you order from Sa's shop, you'll receive a 10% discount on orders of $30 or more. So I will go ahead and put that discount code and links to all the products I've used in the description box down below. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye.